So, Jay Libby or Jay Parker, depending on which context in which you encounter him professionally and so forth, has agreed to join me today. We're going to I'm going to explore a little bit about his motivation with regard to his career and some of the things that kind of make him engaged and vibrant and fervent about the work that he does. And so this video actually serves a double purpose. It's for both the JagTrax 3, the networking class for English degree, the professional networking class, and also for English 1301 with regard to the for the profiling. So when you're going to profile somebody, you don't want to just come out with, so-and-so was born in 1976 and, and give the person's life story. You want to focus in. You want to come in with a line of questions. You want to come in with a goal in mind. So my goal when talking to Jay, I've known Jay for many years, as a fan of his work and as an occasional ear in terms of, giving my opinions on things he's doing. So I'm really curious to know and really interested in how his work as a game designer influences his teaching and vice versa, how his teaching influences his game design. So that's the line of questions I'm going to start with. And of course, if you are interviewing anyone, the interview should take on an organic life of its own. So we may, delve into different subjects and so forth. That's all good. And that's all material that you can use to create the profile, create the picture of the person and of the inquiry that you're having, whether you're doing this for a networking purpose or you're doing this as an investigation. It's essentially the same idea. So I'll go ahead and start. And so Jay, what I'm really interested in is how, these two aspects of your professional life, how they intersect. So how one influences another for you.
I think when I teach college writing classes and stuff, I consider that like the professional development of the game design aspect. So stuff I've learned, when I learned stuff way back when I was in college, I forgot half of that stuff. But then when I'm teaching it, you tend to have the refresher of like, oh, this is how this works. So when I write, I see stuff when I'm grading papers. It's like, oh, don't use that word. Don't use that, the sentence. Like, make sure your adjectives go with the right subject matter or the subject in the sentence. And then vice versa. It's like, I'm a writer, but it's good to teach a writing class every now and then to make sure that you're up on the current trends of writing and whatnot, because it changes. If you just look at slangs from the 1980s to the slang now, you can get thrown in jail for hate crimes for slang we used to use all the time in the 80s. So it's an interesting, the evolution. So for me, I kind of bounce back and forth to make sure that my writing stays current, but also that, I'm getting refreshers on content.
So so it just kind of keeps you sharp. In other words, for when you're working on your designs and stuff. Do you ever, this question just kind of popped into my head, but do you ever get inspired by maybe something a student might bring up in class? Do you think, oh, somebody might make a comment and you're like, oh, that's an interesting idea. I might throw that into a game somewhere or something like that?
Honestly, no. And that sounds so arrogant and whatever, but like I teach engineering students, I teach medical students, I teach people that are going straight to the workforce. There's no real academic future for them. They're going to the workforce, which is where I came from. So before all the teaching and stuff, I was working in the workforce. So I teach them stuff based on their majors. Right. So I think the most thing I ever pulled from a class is, wow, that student has a really cool name. so I'm going to take their first name and put it in a book, which I've done before.
Hey, that's a degree of immortality for that student. So yeah, that's definitely and I find myself in a similar situation. I'm fully aware, as a college writing instructor, that maybe 3%, if even that many, are going to pursue, English or communications or something directly relevant to writing as a craft, as a profession. However, we know as writing instructors that rhetoric and communication and even written communication, kind of bridges a whole lot of gaps. I try to tell my students a lot, even if you're just writing an email, up the chain in your job, if that email is not presented in a professional manner, that can categorize that person, the sender of that email, in a really, not a good light. These skills, can have bearing, as students move forward, not just in, I gotta write that history paper, you know. So yeah. Do you have any? And I know, from talking to you for so many years, and you're incredibly gracious. If you're at all interested in, for those of you watching this video, if you're at all interested in that's traditional tabletop role playing games like D&D and so forth, and if you're interested in superheroes and science fiction, I do. If you go to drivethrurpg.com, I do recommend that you look up Jay Parker and his work, Dilly Green Bean Games. Particularly if you at all enjoy Marvel comics, sci-fi, anywhere from like Alien all the way to Japanese horror and all of those genre elements sort of make their way into Jay's work in one way or another. Some people might think it's a little bit dark. Some of your stuff kind of. But again, for a lot of us, that's what we grew up on and everything. But what I was going to say is that I'm familiar with your work and familiar kind of with your motivation, and I can remember when you were first starting out and when you were still in graduate school, you were very motivated to achieve that that advanced degree in English, because you felt like having some sort of credential was going to differentiate you in the gaming industry as well as a teacher. Have you found that to be true now that you have gone that direction, been in that position for a while?
Well, actually, I have a bachelor's in English, but I have a master's in writing.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah.
Does it help? It helps when someone comes at me, talking down at me and stuff, like, oh, you're not, it's blah blah. It's like, dude, I got a master's degree in writing. What's your degree in? You're working at like Advanced Auto, like stocking shelves. It's like, you clearly did not follow your passion for. And I went to college with people like that were like, I'm going to be the next big game designer who would now work at pizza places. Which, by the way, is working at these places. There ain't nothing wrong with that. Most of my students do that. I'm not above it myself.
My students too. Yep.
But it's like they just don't try to achieve a dream. Like, it's just, or they think they're all that. But like I tell my students that come to my class, it's like, if you got an A in your high school writing class, and I'm looking at this and this is crap, I'll tell you that you are a crappy writer. It's like, clearly someone did not have the heart to tell you need to put more work into it. My entire right through college was more work. When I came to the industry, it was an uphill battle the whole way. And even today, every now and then people are like, yeah, I do favors for friends in the industry, but a lot of people expect me to just do everything for free. And it's like, I got a master's degree. This group will pay me good money to do this. Mm-hmm. You just expect me to do it. It's like, no, it can't work that way.
Yeah, I mean, I just, again, this is just something I just thought of. But if you're thinking in those terms, you could go out and do, like copy editing. You could, all the time, all the energy that you put in your game design that people are essentially in a lot of contexts asking you, oh, just, give me this for free. You could be making it on those number of hours, you could be making an extra, $30,000-$40,000 a year in essence, so I guess that leads me. My next question leads me to, what drives you to continue in the gaming industry? It's obviously not a money maker, right? I mean, of the gaming industry, how many people actually can live on that exclusively? Not many, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe like 6 to 10 people in the whole RPG industry can actually live on it.
I've gotten some pretty sweet contracts, but the contracts are not. I mean, honestly, I've been trying to get out of the industry like for a while now. I grew tired of it, and I still am tired of it to some level. Like you put a lot of time into it. It's like being an adjunct, right? So we put a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of time into it, but are we
yeah.
ever going to get hired full time? It's like most likely until
I
so
did, but
everyone.
I did, but it took me about 18 years.
Yeah,
I mean, seriously, yeah, it took me about 18 years. I did adjunct work for like 18 years. Actually, well, no, about 16 years I did adjunct work. And yeah, it's you can't live on it exclusively. It's crazy,
see,
you
I
know.
have the benefit of being a veteran, so that kind of helps the income
Mm,
aspect of it. But it's like even as an adjunct, unless everyone in my department dies, I'm kind of like in this weird, I'm like in a purgatory for educators. And honestly, I'm fine with that to a degree. Um, I mean, I do the industry thing. Part of this is personal therapy. The art I do for therapy, the writing I do for therapy. So just to keep myself somewhat sane. Because if I didn't, my entire life would be nothing but academia. And
mm.
I see what academia does to academics.
I
Like
mean,
rots
that's
their
actually
brain.
a good point. I mean, the people that I know that are the happiest, quote unquote, in academia are people who are also, writing books, who are not necessarily poets, but are by trade, but who are writing books of poems, or who are doing this project, or who are, working in this nonprofit or this, or doing other things to help keep them balanced as human beings. For some people that's their children, and that's, but yeah, there's definitely, that's a very good point, to have something, that sort of grounds you to reality in a way, even if it is fantasy writing, right?
I mean, I feel like a hypocrite. I tell my students, it's like when I taught business back in the day, it's like if you don't get promoted after you get your degree, it's like find a new job. It's like get a new job and then give your notice. It's like, but it's what am I gonna do? I mean, I love game design, but I drop it in a heartbeat if I could be a full-time faculty member. And I love teaching, and I drop that. Actually, no, I never would drop teaching. I'm doing that for a whole nother purpose. But I'd probably cut back if I was doing full-time design. So it just in game design
Actually,
it gets brutal.
I
So
I really liked the intersection I got to see a couple weeks ago when you were doing the Buck Rogers game, and one of your former students was actually playing in the game, and I got to hear, your student talk about what it was like having you as a professor, which I thought that was really cool, especially in that game context to see that, and yeah. And that's actually a super compliment that she gave you. I'm trying to remember her phrasing exactly, but it was like, there's nothing ever boring in Jay's class. Most people can't say that. So that
I'm
was real.
I'm pretty rough on my students. My rule is I will beat on my students senselessly. So I expect them to work hard for me, but man, I reward them just as hard. And the reward they get isn't even a reward for me. It's the reward they've earned for
Mhm.
themselves.
Right,
So I
right.
mean, I sit there and I get complaints fielded at me left and right from students that can't handle the reality of, sorry, this is a career that you've chosen. You're not cut out for it. Here's some other options. I'm not one to do sales pitches. If I'm teaching and I see a student who's majoring in something that they clearly cannot do, I will find them something else. I mean, heck, I walked one business student out of my classroom, introduced him to a Marine Corps recruiter, and he was gone 2 weeks later.
Oh well, that's yeah.
It's like you do not have the discipline to be in college. You do not have the discipline to do this work. It's like you need focus. here, the military is an excellent place to
And
go.
traditionally students don't experience that kind of gatekeeping really until senior year or early graduate school. There are graduate professors that will do that. Graduate professors will straight up say, you should not be here. That's but rarely do you see that, particularly in the undergraduate level. So
Well,
that's
it's associate programs. I mean, these are tech programs and stuff.
right,
These
right,
kids need to know. I mean, they're spending
right.
money, or their parents are spending
Mhm.
money. And I mean, look, I was in the Navy. I was an engineer. Eh, I'm not going to put anyone's lives at risk by saying, yeah, yeah, and then they electrocute themselves or blow themselves up. So
Well, and that's even in the traditional academic arena. There's been moves to increase enrollment and not enrollment requirement, but admission requirements, because with very low admission requirements, you get a whole lot of students who come in and they're just not prepared, you know, and they have spent the money to attend the classes and so forth. But if they can't pass the classes, then they still have to pay the money back, and a lot of us, I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot because my particular position is contingent on enrollment. So ideally, you would think I'd want this huge influx of students, but at the same time, I don't want to be in a position where these students are failing these classes and then they're saddled with all this debt. That's not ethical at all by any stretch of the imagination. So it's
yeah, that's something I was talking to my dad about today too. It's like I'm teaching all online in the fall because of COVID,
right. Yeah, yeah, me
and
too. Well, yeah,
and I've got this class. I've got a class I'm teaching. It's kind of like you kind of have to pay your dues and teach the class. A lot of people don't teach it because it's not an easy class in person, and it's because the the base of students ranges from the hillbilly kid who never got was never paid attention to because they played football and they were ignored by their teachers, to ESL students who at our local high schools, and I have no problem saying this publicly, aren't teaching them.
right.
They're checking them off and throwing them at the college, thinking that we can like just we have the manpower to facilitate. I have students that I've had in this specific class that can't even read. And it's like, when did you graduate from high school? Last year. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, and you can't read. How did you graduate and not read? And so the school's been where I work. We've worked very hard to have community outreach to make sure that people are there's a bridge, because look, someone comes here from another country and they want to succeed. I'm damn well going to help them succeed.
Right.
But we need to make sure they have logistical support for that. And so it's rough. I mean,
And
it's like
that's something that even at the four-year institution that we're actually working on those bridges right now and establishing those bridges. Especially, it becomes really problematic because state legislatures now are passing laws. I think it's by 2025. No state school in Texas, for example, no four-year school in the state of Texas, for example, is going to be allowed to offer any kind of remediation, any kind of remedial courses, which means it's all going to fall on the community college.
yeah.
Unless we create these sort of bridge courses, and we could, so we're really kind of exploring those avenues because, as you pointed out, there's a real deficit in a lot of the high schools. And it's not always necessarily the faults of the teachers per se. It's the systematically. It's just crazy, which is why I don't teach high school. Right? That's I can remember doing an internship to teach high school back in like '97 or something, and it just looked to me more like a prison. It was like they didn't care what the students were learning. They cared like which room the students were in. It was kind of like, okay, you go from this cell to this cell for this hour. All right, everybody's in their cell. All right, we're good. All right, So I don't know, but I feel for the students, and what really gets me are the students who will tell me or will write in their journals or whatever. They'll say, well, when I was like in second or third grade, I had a real passion for writing, and I used to write stories, and I used to do this. But by the time I got into high school, you know, I hated it, or you know, so there's some kind of disconnect that goes on.
I've had, I mean, one of the schools up here that they go on the news and they brag about how much great work they're doing with our refugee population. It's like, and I get those students, and I'm like, what have you done? It's like I ask the students, what do they teach you when you're in high school? So I kind of figure out like what, because I always have my students write one page about themselves the first day of class.
Right.
So that
Right,
helps
yeah.
me create all the benchmarks I need, so I know how to. I'll fluid out my class to make sure that everyone's taught based on what they need to learn, versus here's a flat template. And it's amazing. Like, I mean, I got students who just, they were told, yeah, you're doing good, but they weren't doing anything. And luckily, I have some very honest students who are just like, they weren't teaching us. They were just, you know, we do horrible work. We knew it was horrible, and they wouldn't tell us how to do it right. They just like, yeah, this is good, and then they just pass us. It's like, well, you can't. It's like, you know. So I don't know. We're at the front line of that, trying to fix that.
So a couple more things, just kind of veering it a little bit back to the gaming subject based on some things that you said. So you said you said you're tired of the industry. This coming from a person who is extremely prolific, like that's not like meshing, you know. So you know, what keeps you, you know, producing so much? I mean, for a while you were putting out like one product a month, or you know, sometimes two products a month, you know, that kind of thing. Like,
Well, it started with the fans. Like for you, for example, it's like I remember back
yeah,
in the day, you're like, hey, Jake, you do this? I'm like, yeah, sure. Here you go.
yeah,
And these days, I don't know. I mean, the industry is nasty. I mean, it's a nasty place to work. I mean, I was told by one gentleman who's a complete putz that I'd never make it in the industry, and blah blah. And I'm still pretty stable in the industry. I wouldn't call myself prolific, and I can't even pronounce it today. A little tired. I wouldn't say that. And people say, and you're not the only person who said that. And it's like, I don't know where people are getting that from, because literally I've been jammed in a closet since I started in the industry. Yeah, I do things with some big names here and there, but it's like not, you know, I just do it. And it does it in, you know, for example, like this week I'm trying to do art and stuff for a product I was hoping to get out, at least part one of it, before the new term starts, because I know once the term starts, it's gonna be busy. You know, I've wrapped up stuff for the new Cyberpunk Red. I've got another thing for Cyberpunk Red. I guess I'm doing next week. So it's just like, I don't know. I just keep doing it. I mean, in the case of things like Artel Story, and I mean, it's harder for me to say no to Mike, because Mike got me in the industry. He was the one who ushered me in completely, versus what I was before that, which it would have been nothing. And I'm still kind of nothing. I just, like I say, hang out, do my thing. Because if you're too big in the industry, and then people come gunning for you. So I just hide out, create my stuff. People like it, great. If they don't, well, I don't make it for them. I make it for the fans. It's like, as long as one fan says that's a great idea, I'll keep doing it. You and another fellow there got me working on the sci-fi thing. I've been watching so many science fiction films for the new Chronicle book 2. It's like, God.
yeah. That's a sort of a cyberpunk slash mecha space opera type.
No,
Uh,
not space opera. We're
oh,
moving. We're moving to the into the dark colonization of the solar system for the next.
okay,
You
okay.
don't get space opera from me. Come on.
Don't
Well,
get
I
space.
mean, Xandoria was sort of space opera.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
the
yeah.
Chronicle stuff. That's the first book was cyberpunk stuff, and then Mike came back to the industry and said, "Oh, by the way, I'm back." And it's like, well, great. I spent 2 years working on this book, and am I going to have to shelf it? He's like, "Let me look at it." He's like, "Nope, you haven't stepped on our toes. Go ahead." I'm like, "Okay." And then I didn't publish anything after that to go with it, because what's the point? So
Yeah.
you now have Cyberpunk 2077 coming out, and Cyberpunk Red. You don't need another Cyberpunk book.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I think I've had that video game on pre-order for, you know, a year or something like that. Not for me, because I don't play the I don't I always avoided the console games because I figured my OCD would just kick in and I wouldn't be able to do anything else. So I just avoided that. But so what advice for students would you have in terms of like goal setting, you know, and that sort of thing? Like what do you feel is necessary for a student to go from, you know, they have this idea or they have this passion for something and then taking that to fruition?
In my case, I outline, and then I immerse myself in whatever genre I'm working in. So for the Chronicle Book 2, I've been watching 2001, 2010. Red Planet, I just pulled up on my list, which is a terrible movie, but I'm going to use it anyways. Basically, Outland with
That's a
Sean
good
Connery.
Yeah, yeah.
So I always immerse myself in it. For the Phantom War stuff I'm working on right now, I'm watching Ronin Warriors. Why? Because I need that dark, Japanese, demon style thing especially where I'm doing the art. I want to have the constant visuals in my head. When I do fantasy stuff, I think I have 5 hours of Dragon Quest soundtracks. When I work on Zandoria, I have 16 hours of Phantasy Star music. So it's an immersion process, and scheduling is the other thing. It's like, know what you're going to do. So I have been doing like half a week of one product, half a week of the next, and now I have to go back to 1 week of just one product, and then the next week will be the other. And you have to stick to it. I mean, you can look, there are some people in the industry that have been working on the same game forever, and it still isn't out yet. Why? Because they're like, they get distracted by other things.
We can all name a few of those. I mean, there's a couple of Kickstarters out there that are on like year 5 or something like that.
Well, luckily with Mechton, they actually gave back the money to the.
Yeah, they did, and I used the money. I immediately used the money to buy the Mechton PDFs, so I just put it back into the company. But yeah.
Yeah, so it's don't get distracted by things. If you're gonna do it, you do it. Maybe it's not gonna take off like you want it to, but my God, I've written a lot of crap over the years, and it's like you just throw it to the wall, and eventually you finally get to the right thing. I mean, look at G-Core. We're on the third version of G-Core, and that's the right one. That's the one that's working.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that the other day because I'm introducing someone in her late 30s to RPGs who's always been very curious about it and maybe played like 2 D&D games in college but never really got into it. And I was looking at G-Core and I was looking at a couple other systems, and one of the things that's cool about G-Core is you're just rolling one die. I mean, how simple is that? You're just taking one 10-sided die, and that's your die, your roll. Stuff like that, especially in the situation that we find ourselves in now with gaming virtually. It almost necessitates that kind of thing. Because I mean, if you take for example like Rollmaster, like somebody trying to do Rollmaster online would just be a complete and utter nightmare. I just something like that. Even for new players, even something like Palladium would be just kind of crazy.
It's like I ran Alien in person, the new Alien game, and it was like, that game runs really easy in person. Try running it online. Holy cow, bad idea.
Well, doesn't it? I mean, we're getting into like technical stuff that a lot of the students are probably like turning the video off at this point, but that's okay. Doesn't it have like specialized dice? Like
that too, but it has cards for initiatives.
Oh yeah, see, I don't mess with games with cards.
Yeah.
If anybody's listening, if any industry people are listening to this, if I see cards as a requirement, unless it's playing cards that I can buy at Walmart, if I see cards as a requirement for a game, I am not buying the game. I'm sorry, that's just. Yeah.
The other thing is, as a designer and a creator, is try other games out, and don't jump on the games that everyone's jumping on. So like, if you go, oh, what's the best superhero game? People are like, oh, Mutants Masterminds and Icons and blah blah, and it's like,
Superlatives is good. Have you read that yet?
No, I won't buy my competition.
Oh, okay. I thought
I've got
You
Heroes
said look at,
Unlimited because
you
that's
just
what I
said
cut
look
my
at,
teeth on
yeah,
along with Marvel.
you just said look at other games. I said, okay, well, I'll just threw that out there. And
Uh,
that's like a threadbare operation. Like the dude doesn't even have art. Like, I mean, he's just got like, you know, and it's not perfect. I mean, there aren't, but it's an interesting concept. If it's a superhero game, if it's not too overpriced, I will generally look at it. But there are some games that come out and you're like $30 for a PDF, really? Like really, for a 100-page PDF? Anyway, uh, excellent. Any closing thoughts or any any ideas, any advice you'd give for either somebody wanting to break into the industry, students in general who are maybe have a career, an idea of what they want to do, but they think it's maybe too lofty of a goal, or
well, when I was in grad school, I had some peers of mine that used to come to me with their books. Can you make this a game? I'm like, well, how does it end? Well, we don't know yet. I'll know in like 3 books later. I'm like, then I can't make it a game.
yeah.
The game, if you create a game from your fiction, it's one massive spoiler. You have to know how it ends. You can't do, I'm going to do a Star Wars game where we never know who Darth Vader is. You have to know who's Luke Skywalker's father later on down the line. There has to be that, it has to be in there. These are things that you have. So, I don't know. I mean, here's the reality. Get a job. Go get a job. Go flip burgers at Burger King. True story. I've done that. Go do hospital security. Done that too. Go enlist in the military. Done that. Go deliver flowers. I've done that. But get yourself some jobs. Go to school. Focus on your academics. Make sure that you take your academics seriously. If you're an athlete and you're watching this video, what happens if you get hurt and you can't play anymore? Have the academic fallback. I mean, that's just how you have to do it. Understand that the industry isn't nice. It's rare you're going to find someone nice. I mean, when I came in, it was like I was one of the 2 redheaded stepchildren of Fusion, and it was ugly, like very nasty. And even to this day, some of those people still freaking hate me. Even more so now because it's like of how far where I am now compared to back then. But you know what your product is. You know what your idea is. Take your idea, grow the idea, experiment, play test your stuff out. Before you say, I'm going to create a new system, that's great, create a new system, but play test it. I talked to a guy at a gaming store, a local shop that was working on a card game, and I saw him at a free RPG day or an anniversary party at the shop later. I was like, hey, how'd that go? He said, well, I got out of it because there wasn't interest. Now, when he was telling me about it, I knew there wasn't going to be an interest. I mean, that sounds horrible. And there's lots of people like, I get this great idea, and it's like, well, it's not a great idea. Even I know some of my ideas are not great ideas. I mean, I put out, like one year, I put out like 80-something modules or whatever. Of the 80-something modules, Spy Core was the one that sold huge. And people weren't even using it for the setting. They were using it for their own games. And it's like, okay, that's cool. So I know. I mean, I put stuff out there that either people really love or they hate. I mean, sometimes I put stuff out just to be obnoxious. Sometimes I put stuff out because it's fun. I mean, I put out a Twilight parody module called Twite, and I didn't do anything with it. I put out some Swords of Wizardry stuff, like I think Pay What You Want, and like no, like 2 people downloaded this stuff. I mean, and I put it's like, hey, $1.50 or pay what you want, whatever. I don't care. It was a cheaper thing. I think it was $1.50, and it just that's why I'm not like I'm going to do tons of Swords and Wizardry stuff. It's a great game. I love the system. Use it here at home. Does it sell for me? No, it doesn't. My ideas for that type of system are way too off the wall for what the fan base wants. That's why G-Core works great for me. So you have to take the hits and stick with it. I mean, I've been doing this since 2001. So, and only because of Kurt here, his support, and some other fans that have stuck with me over the years.
Got about 50. You probably have about 50 core fans at least at this point. Probably more than that, I
I
would
think
think.
I have maybe 15.
15, you think? I bet
G-Core,
you.
G-Core Prime sold really well, but it's like,
Yeah, it
you
did.
know,
Yeah. Um, it's interesting you say say that next that brings me to another question, but it is interesting that you say that you have to have a conclusion to your narrative, because when the original DC superheroes, the Mayfair DC Heroes game came out in '85, it was right when they did Crisis on Infinite Earths. And as they were writing the game, the Crisis on Infinite Earths had not been resolved. And so it was like every third page, it's like, well, we don't know. We don't know what it's like, what that's going to be, because the Crisis on Infinite Earths hadn't been resolved. And so that was a real factor in that game. I mean, the system was good. I mean, that, especially for the time. But that kept coming up. You know, is that they didn't know, and that was and with licensed products, you have to do that, and then also if you're working with a licensed product, and this is very technical stuff for people that don't care, but sometimes those licenses have stipulations in them, like, well, you have to have a core book that includes all of the film, all of the film properties, which is why Wizards of the Coast did so many freaking Star Wars core books, when they had that license, or why I think it's Cubicle 7 is basically their Doctor Who is kind of almost in limbo, because there's a new Doctor. They got to create a new core. They got to come out with a new core book, which they haven't yet. But things like that. That's why arguably the last edition, the last Palladium edition of Robotech, didn't do as well, because at the time, Harmony Gold said, "Well, you've got to do it on Shadow Chronicles." Fans don't care about Shadow Chronicles, that's the thing. But they were, because I wrote a real I wrote a real critical review of Shadow Chronicles. Actually, it was published on some site. I can't remember. It's like one of the sites that no longer exists. But Symbieta got kind of pissed. And he was basically defending him. And I like Kevin Symbieta. I don't know him well. I mean, I've talked to him on the phone once. I don't know the guy, but he's a titan in the industry and everything, and I respect him. But he got a little upset. He was like, we have to do it this way. They made it. They made us do it this way. So I mean, all these kind of factors. So there is kind of an advantage to coming up with your own evolving story.
yeah.
So I've also thought a lot about, personally, game design as a form of literary criticism. And so, because when you're looking at somebody's game, what you're seeing is their lens on that particular property. There's a big difference. For example, from like MERP, the 1980s role-playing game on Middle Earth, versus the One Ring that was just out, or even the D&D version, which kind of like overlays D&D on top of that. So that kind of stuff fascinates me. And I know you had one novel that you did, and you had like a set of guys like create a game on the side of that.
Yeah, I wrote a novel in my last year in the Navy. Never published the bloody thing, and then we built a game on it, which sucked. I mean, I've written for Doctor Who, and so it's like the new Doctor Who series with the new Doctor wiped out all the stuff that we had worked on. So I'm like,
Well, yeah, I think that's going to bite them in the butt. Ultimately, they're going to have to reintroduce a lot of that stuff, because I mean, you can't just wipe out 51 years of lore.
yeah. I think
Things.
you talk about the literary analysis. So it's like you look at classic cyberpunk. So when I was working on the missions for the new Red Book, the scream sheets and stuff, you can see there is I know what Mike likes, like how Mike writes, and then I know how he wants me to present ideas. So all my stuff I presented is absolutely dark. It's like not friendly. They gave me here's what we want the missions to be about. And there were some happy-go-lucky missions, and even the Cyberpunk Red box set is very like watered down from what you and I know is classic gritty, let's kill everybody Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
So my screen sheets reflect classic Cyberpunk. So I took a lot of their happy ideas and I turned them into a good old J. Parker murder fest, because that's, or took it down dark paths, because Cyberpunk isn't about happiness. It's not about oh, it's such a great world, or a pacifist idea of a dark world. There's no such thing. If you're a pacifist, you can't process really what a dark. You can have dark fantasies that maybe you should be on meds for, but it's harder for them to grasp what's it really like. I mean, if I want to know like what it means for someone to die or die horribly in a certain way, I know people have served in the military that have seen those things. And if I want to know, I'll go ask. It's like, hey, I'm writing about this. Give me a nice analogy to what this is like, so I can reflect it in this, or even stuff I've seen. So it's like, it sounds horrible. I'm not a horrible person. Well, I am, but I don't know. I'm something. But yeah, so we took the old Cyberpunk, and I gave it more life again in red in the missions. So we'll see how much of that makes it through the editors and filters. So you got pretty dark.
Yeah. And I mean, you bring up something else too that I hadn't even really considered, is that, the role an editor plays in stuff like that. Because an editor can just swap over so much, and by the time it comes out the other end, it's like, this is not what I wrote. How does it? Yeah. How does So that's a really good point.
Tim Cass can tell you all about that. He had that happen where an editor kind of chopped up his stuff. It wasn't the editor's fault either, and Tim's very protective of his writing, and so it was a very it kind of caused a hoopla, and it's like, well, I understand. I'm friends with the editor, very nice person, and I know they didn't mean any harm. Or one of the editors. There were two editors. I don't know about the second. I don't know what they were thinking either way. I would have had him on the phone and be like, "Can I change this?" So, and I've had phone conversations where I've sent stuff to Artal, and Mike's called me. He's like, "What are you thinking by putting this in here?" And it's like, "Yeah, but we did that with this." He's like, "Yeah, we can't do that this time around." I'm like, "Okay." So he'll communicate. So it's like, "Okay, I'll go back and fix it. Something you don't like, let's adjust it so it's to what the editors,
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, in most industries, communication can really, really make the difference. But in any sort of creative, and anytime you sort of wed inextricably creativity with money, that's where you get the real petty. I mean, because I've seen really really petty stuff, like on on threads and stuff, people just calling each other every name in the book, and and all this stuff over some dice, so, so, I mean, like, it's like, come on, people, this is supposed to be a hobby, that people enjoy, and yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's amazing in a way. You bring up somebody like Tim Kask, whom I don't know, but I know that he's like an old school, he's like one of the old folks, and so you'd think that there'd be more of a deference, for somebody like that, But I guess like there are very few of those people left. Like Jim Ward is still out there, and but so few, so many of them, they're getting up there in age, and
Careful, Kurt. We're getting that old too, man.
Nah, I'm not 50 yet, man. I did have
another couple years for you, though, right?
Yeah. I did have someone point out the other day my silver hair, and I was like, okay.
Come on, Kurt. You should join me. We just shave our heads, so.
No. She was also. I'm not going to give a lot of detail because students will be watching this, but she was also playing with my hair as she said it. So, I'll take the silver hair comment with.
I'll send you a Moxie camouflage hat so you'll blend in with the Texas natives down there. I used to live in Texas, so I was stationed down there.
Yeah, we are. You actually live real close to where my father was a judge. My father was a judge in the town you lived in, and he was
Ingleside. That's right.
Ingleside. Yeah, and ultimately he right before his death, he was the emergency management coordinator of Iran's Pass. He would have like freaking loved COVID, not because it's COVID, but because he would have been the guy in charge. he would have just eaten that up, yeah, totally. But he also put a dude in jail for on Thanksgiving for stealing a can of tuna fish. He was that kind of judge. You probably really would have. You would have gotten along with him like totally.
Down in Texas, where my shipmates would come out of the bar and get arrested for public intoxication the minute they stepped out of the parking lot.
Oh, he might have let them off because they were Navy guys though. But my father actually grew up in Philadelphia, which is
I'm stationed there too.
Oh yeah, but anyway, so yeah, it was a really good conversation. A lot of insight. Appreciate your candor. So pulling it back just a little bit for the sake of the students, so when you do your interviews, folks, I'm not going to require you to record them on Zoom. You can if you want to link me to the recordings, you can. What I'm going to ask you to do, though, is to do a form of transcription, whether it's, the actual video or it's a paper transcription. I want you to do a transcription so that you have that artifact from which to draw to create your interview. Please do not quote every line of your interview. Nobody on earth wants to read that. I mean, as far as reading the essay, right? Nobody wants to do that. Think about like the key points, the stuff that jumps out, the stuff that answers your questions. If more questions were raised in the interview than you initially had, and it deviates from the idea that you initially had, that's wonderful. Take your profile in the direction and the flow of the interview, and spend some time in the actual essay portion. And I'll create more videos that talk about this in greater detail. But think about, reflect upon, hey, what did I think about, when he said this? How does this relate to my thoughts and how I'm thinking about this, or how I might think about what I want to do in the future? So my plan at this point, particularly for the college writing students who are going to be doing profiles in the latter part of the semester, I'm going to attempt to the best of my ability to model for you what you need to do, so you can look at my work and say, okay, well, he did this, I can come up with something like that. But for the networking students, your assignment's pretty cut and dry. You just need to interview somebody and kind of, assess the interview. That's not as big a deal. That's for your context. That's just a 1 hour course. It's kind of like one of those courses that we just throw at them because the state says, well, you need to have this kind of course. And they basically on my end, they throw me $1,000 and they say, go teach these 4 assignments. So, hey, that's what I'm doing. I'm teaching these 4 assignments,
I do that up here with workforce development. Every now and then I'll go teach employees how not to kill each other in the workplace.
There you go.
Professional development and whatnot. So
that's exactly what in fact, they've actually done away with these courses. What they've done is they've consolidated all the courses into a University 101 for freshmen, which is probably what they should have done in the beginning. But, hey, there's a learning curve, and, but for the students who still need this for their degree plans, we're offering it. And I'm just trying to make it not pointless. I want them to come out, with some idea that they didn't have, or some skill set that they didn't necessarily have, or a refinement of that skill set by the time they, leave this little 1 hour experience. So anyway, I appreciate your time. I know you're a very busy man.
This week slightly, just got done building all my classes, and then it's like, they're like, oh, don't forget to add this. So it's like pop back in and build some more. So I teach journalism, and then I got called the college writing seminars. So yeah, and then
I'm building mine week to week. I'm not even going to pretend that I'm not. So
our school's requiring us to have everything. It's interesting. They told us to have everything done, and then they said I couldn't teach via Zoom, but then I'm looking at everyone's emails and like, oh, I'm teaching via Zoom. I'm like, I hate all of you people. It's like,
No,
whatever. Like, you know.
we don't have any kind of stipulation like that. In fact, I would think it's counterproductive to have everything in place, because for a lot of us, we'd have to go back and change so much depending on, depending on the ebb and flow of the semester and all of that. But
I got my
anyway,
rubric up. That's all that matters.
yeah, yeah. All that matters is that students hopefully are learning, having a good experience, and we're still getting paychecks. We are still
Yeah.
getting paid.
Yeah, you get paid more for your 1 hour classes than I sure get paid for all the work I do for my workforce. I have to talk to them about that. It's like, hey, in Texas, my buddy's making this much. Why am I getting
They
paid?
just throw me a flat $1,000 for the 1 hour course.
That's
But
pretty sweet.
but that's for the entire semester though. That's 1,000 for 3 months.
Oh, okay. I make more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, it's not like they're asking me. I mean, in defense of the university, they're not asking me to, it's not the same amount of effort that I'm putting into my, my writing courses, and so and I pretty much, I mean, these students are experienced, they're invested in their programs and so forth, so they're pretty much on autopilot, at this point anyway.
Well, I wish all your students the best, man. I hope you all kick butt too, because look, the harder you work, it does pay off. You want to slack, you're not going to get anywhere. So.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my students, I think, could identify with you, because a lot of them are survivors. I mean, they have lived through some crazy stuff. I mean, even as 17, 18, 19-year-olds, they've lived through some, because a lot of our students, they come from south side of San Antonio, which is very historic San Antonio, but it's also, not the wealthiest section of town, and so forth. And so yeah, and they're fully aware that they have opportunities that their parents and grandparents didn't have, and so they're very invested. And at the same time, a lot of them, like this summer, I had students who were taking, and I don't know who okayed this, but some of them were taking like 9 hours in the summer and working full time, and it like so. But hey, do what you got to do. So, all right, I appreciate your time. I'm sure I'll be catching up with you later. Seeing what products you have down the line, seeing what YouTube updates and so forth you've got going on, and what games you're running. We've still got G.I. Joe to pick up at some point.
Oh, dude, I know. It's like Flint's like, hey, you want to do Buck Rogers every weekend? I'm like, no.
Oh wow.
I need to have a week prep, and I still need to have time to grade all my student papers into.
Yeah, he's also got a wife and a child at home and 2 in college, right? Wow. So yeah.
Ain't no rest for the wicked. To hang out with you long enough on here, I'm gonna get my Texas Southern drawl back, and can't be having that.
Oh yeah.
Can't understand a damn thing I say when it starts up.
All right, man. Have a great afternoon. Again, thank you so much.
Not a problem, Kurt. Thank you.
Sure.